I will be doing it in English. I'm going to start off with a small Deutsche Geschichte, because ich habe 5 Jahre in der Schule Deutsch gelernt und ich habe nur einmal in Deutschland besucht. Aber mein Deutsch ist sehr, sehr schlecht. In fact, this picture here is from the one time I visited Germany. I rode my bike, mein Fahrrad, von Italien über die Schweiz, durch Deutschland und nach Schweden. Und here was kind of the end of the whole journey. And I was the einzige Person, die Deutsch sprach. And I told everyone, don't worry, I speak German. If we run into anybody who doesn't speak English, I will take over. And so we were at we would always stop and eat breakfast after about 25 miles, a small place where we get Frühstück, Kaffee. Aber ich trinke kein Kaffee. Ich möchte nur heiße Schokolade. That was my thing, right? And so I already knew the term. I was pretty sure heiße Schokolade was how you said hot chocolate. So we were at this little gelato shop which served coffee. And I said to them, möchte ich ein Cup heiße Schokolade. And the lady looked at me so weird. I don't know if that's a thing, if anybody there drinks hot chocolate for breakfast. I'm guessing not. But I was like, I told everybody else, I was like, I can figure this out. Don't worry, I speak German. I'll just explain how it is. So I'm like, okay, it's milk and a little bit of chocolate and it's hot. So you just mix it up. So I was like, Milch und Schokolade heiß. Schokolade heiß, right? And she came back with a big bowl of chocolate ice cream. And from that point on, I decided that I had lost all credibility in speaking German. So I really give all of my presentations in English because my German really is bad. But I start off with that. That's just for you. I've never started off any presentation like that. But I just want to say I'm happy to be giving a presentation to you all because I spent 5 years studying German and I've yet to come to Germany to give an actual talk. It also makes the point that science communication really is important. And I know that there's a mix of you out there. Some of you are scientists, some of you are into media, but I hope that both of you can get something out of this conversation, because if you're a scientist, what I'm saying is going to really hit home. And if you're a communicator, then I'm hoping you can see how I talk with scientists and to scientists, and you can get a lot out of it as well. So there's going to be a little fidgeting. I have to share my screen here. Let's see, share screen. That screen. Okay. All right. So yes, that's from my trip to Germany. Okay. So I could very easily have made this presentation called Story, Journey, and Passion and Finding Balance in Communicating Science. I'm going to go a little more heavy-handed on the actual communication part of it. But I think that if you are a scientist, you need to understand the basics of why it's important. And if you're a communicator, you need to understand how the scientists view all of this. And it's going to be really important for you to understand my background because it has shaped how I see all of this. So I'm not sure, what info you had coming into this presentation, but just so you know, I have 3 main projects that I work on mostly. They're all internet-based. I have Untamed Science, which is a website that I've been running for 12 years. It's a nonprofit, and we try to mostly make science fun. I have a YouTube channel called Science Filmmaking Tips and Tricks, which I run with my buddy Jonas, and we've been doing that on YouTube for 5 years. And we also have now a new project, which I'm calling Stone Age Man, which is kind of the next version of what I'm doing, which is just to try to connect people to nature in a very tangible way, a little bit like Boy Scouts, because I feel like if I can give people tools to get outside and enjoy nature, then they'll learn it all on their own. I don't have to like heavy-handedly tell them what to think. Okay, so this is going to be kind of fun. I mix so much media into all of my storytelling approaches. So I'm going to give you a quick, like 2-minute version, or maybe it's even a little bit less, of how I got to be where I am today. So this is what people call a draw my life. It was very popular back in the day. And sometimes they'd start as babies, but I'm going to start in 1999 when I was 20 years old, and I went to Australia to study marine science, which is where I met Jonas, who I do all my filmmaking with. And I was sitting in the stands and I watched a show about the Great Barrier Reef. And I was so inspired by that show. It was just so amazing to see what happened. I went down and I asked the person, how do you start doing what you're doing? And he said, get a video camera and just start telling stories. Any story you can and as often as you can. So that's exactly what I did. A few years later, in 2003, when I was doing my graduate work at the University of Hawaii, I decided I would self-fund my first documentary. So I borrowed some money from my dad. I bought a video camera, a bunch of plane tickets for my friends, a $150 van, and we traveled 7,000 miles through Mexico. And it's not like we were, doing this the fancy way, because the van had no air conditioning. So we traveled with the door open the whole time and the seats weren't bolted down. It was totally sketchy. We called it the Biodiversity of Mexico. And 2 years from that trip, I had to pay off all the debt from that thing. So I got this sailboat. It was $900. I lived on it offshore. And that's about when things started to change for me and how I viewed the world, because I sailed that sailboat one day, not having checked the weather, into the storm of the decade. And basically a wave took the boat and smashed it end over end and sank it to the bottom of the ocean. And I was swimming for my life for 3 hours, grabbed onto one of the last buoys out to sea a few miles offshore, and got rescued by the Coast Guard. But I was able to think that day about what was really important, because all of my research, all the notes, all the computers, all my cameras, everything was at the bottom of the ocean. And I had to start fresh and think a little bit about why was I doing what I was doing. And essentially I was asking this one main question, and it's what is important? And there's nothing like a near-death situation to make you think a little bit more about that. And so that's kind of the gist of what got me into filmmaking. That's my story. And from then on, I went on to do a second master's degree in filmmaking at Montana State. And let's see, and do all of the filmmaking that I do now. So what I realized is that in my filmmaking, or in my science, that I felt like people judged me quite a lot for how I did science. So I did a lot of adventurous things as a scientist. And this is, I had a lot of friends who were also adventurous. So this just as a few things. I did a lot of different sports. I was a competitive triathlete at the time as well, so I was training a lot. But I just found it weird that, if you were a scientist, you were expected to just do science, not do both of these things. And I wanted to get people who were maybe there in Hawaii studying and surfing a lot to also see that science could be cool and something that they could integrate into their lives. So I started mixing all of this into my videos. And I started doing this fun thing where, and I know people have done this a lot in the past, but I called it Draw a Scientist. So I was teaching undergraduate lab classes, and I'd always have everybody draw what they thought a scientist to look like. And this was before even people got into like what race should a scientist be? I was just a white guy, but I was trying to get a feeling for like, what was he wearing? And it was always a crazy old white guy with, crazy hair and a lab coat. But that was so far from the scientist that I was, that I thought to myself, why don't I try to change that stereotype? I don't know. This is what was in my head at the time. Right. And so I never had people draw me. These are pictures of me from grad school, which, by the way, the one on the left was when I was in grad school in Hawaii, and the one on the right is when I was in grad school in Montana doing science filmmaking. I will note, everybody said that I looked very German in my cross-country ski outfit, because no American wears this. And so I am curious if you guys, being German, think that's like totally normal, or is that totally normal? Okay. Or is that also kind of weird? I know. Okay. Well, okay. I'll just say you think it's cool, and we'll move on. Hold on. Where's my cursor? Oh, and then I also had a phase where I had blue hair, and definitely nobody drew that. In 2008, I started up what I called Untamed Science. We did over 400 videos for high school, middle school, and elementary. And this was the outfits we all had for elementary science. Very few people drew anybody that looked like us. So can you guys see my cursor? You can, right? Yeah, okay. So I don't know why. I think this was also my German coming out, my German background coming out. I chose full leather. Also, is that cool or not? I don't, okay, no, giving lots of no's. This is my friend Danny Washington, who does a lot of marine science stuff. This is Jonas, who's Swedish. Haley is my wife now. And if you ever watch Primal Survivor on National Geographic, this is my buddy Hazen Ondell. And so we tried to just make an alternative view of what science was for kids. And I think that was really fun. I think we were quite successful. But now I want to flip this a little bit, because I think back in the day, I was really concerned with we should diversify what scientists look like. And I think maybe we're there. Some of you might disagree, but I think the diversity of drawings that I get now it's all over the map. It's what people are seeing on TV mostly. Now, if you're a scientist, I want you to think, what should a scientist do? It's a similar question, but it's something worth thinking about. Now, in today's day and age, well, let me go back. I think generally most people would say a scientist should probably study the world around them and then communicate that to the world, right? So it's two pieces. But I think what happens is in today's world, it's you write grants, you do research, and you publish, and those publications are in peer-reviewed journal articles. And that's more or less where it ends. Occasionally you can do some broader impacts, but nobody seems to treat those or really care too much about those. Oops, every time I have to click on the next one. Okay. So I want everybody to just kind of remember, this is all big picture stuff, and it is important if you're only studying media too. Right here, over here on the left, this is peer-reviewed journal articles. These are scientists who are reading the paper, right? So that's part of the communication. But then all in the middle here, you have the general public. Now, the general public may get it in a magazine. A lot of the time, it's all going to be online now. So they're looking at popular science articles. They're looking at YouTube videos, or they're just reading news headlines, probably. They're looking at their social feed. Okay, so we'll talk a lot about this middle group. And then I also want to bring this up because I spend a lot of my time over here. This group, this is politicians or a politician. Sometimes it's most effective if you want change to happen to make media just for the eyes of a politician. And the way I see it, I'm often making videos for a staffer. So I have the image of a staffer in my head who might look at this video, a scientist brought it to them, and then they will say, here, watch this video. And I have a few examples of videos that I'm pretty sure I made that were then seen by either our president, a president, or a staffer down the line, which I'm not sure if I am happy about that or not. So we'll see. So anyways, it's just important to think, like, what is it that scientists should be doing, and should they be mixing media more into it? Now, if you're a scientist, my goal at the end of my career is that scientists will mix more media into their outreach. If you're in media, this is your selling point. If you're working with a scientist or literally anybody else who doesn't mix enough media in, I hope I will show you some tools about how important videos are and how effective they can be in reaching people and making real change. So this is the route I went. I just point this out because I was a scientist. Now I consider myself a biologist, but I tell stories. And the weird thing is that because there's almost no way to continue making videos as a biologist, and I can't find funding for things, I've kind of become an entrepreneur science filmmaking. So I raise money from the people that watch our videos and make videos from that. So it's just, I point it out because the system makes it really difficult for someone like me to make a living doing it online, even with the scientists that I'm trying to work with to get their messages out. Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the big picture approach here and why science communication is so important. I feel like it's a very powerful tool to inspire people. When I think back to what inspired me to get into science, I can pinpoint it exactly. It was watching Jacques Cousteau. Um, it was watching his underwater films in the 80s and thinking, I want to do that. Like I was 600 miles from the ocean and I wanted to go and study coral reefs. I mean, it made no sense. It wasn't something that I saw in my real life, but it inspired me to do that. So when I started teaching, I was teaching undergraduate biology classes. It's how I paid for my graduate work, like a lot of graduate students do. I was giving PowerPoint presentations to a bunch of people who were in a classroom, and the videos were incredibly boring. This was in 2000. I think nowadays we have good videos, but that's why I started. I started because I looked at those videos and I said, I'm going to go do those myself. So I created a whole series of videos for my class. And then the head of the biology program saw what I was doing and then had me do them for every other teacher. And that kind of allowed me to think, wow, maybe I can make these useful for other people moving forward. So these are kind of how we would make films. This is just a short little clip, like 1 minute.
A lot of people ask us what Untamed Science is.
That's gonna be tough.
It's gonna be great.
It's,
This is Untamed Science.
I love the deep sea.
We're going to try to answer the question, when is acceleration the greatest in skydiving?
But we're not just a bunch of adventurers, we're also scientists and filmmakers.
So we pick a topic, and then we show the practical application of that out in the wild.
Wall clouds forming. We're gonna get a tornado.
get out of here! Get out! Get out! No! Get out of here!
It looks steep.
This is no ordinary afternoon ride.
I'm already starting to lose track of how many days we've been riding.
So if you like what we're doing,
Okay, I'll pause it there. Did you see the bike trip? That was Germany right there. Okay, I'm going to stop the sharing for just a second. That was the trip where I rode through. Okay, so just for a second, I'm going to be full screen, and I just want to talk through a few of these concepts, and then we'll get back to sharing that. This is all just to set the stage for some of the important TV work that I did too. So all of that went into the biology textbooks that ended up going out to 55% of the kids in the US got our videos in their books. So, oops, apparently that's me. I was asking someone to help me with my German and they didn't get back to me till now. So that was really good. I felt like maybe we made a difference in the 4 or 5 years of filmmaking that we did in these books. Now I realize that one of the most important things that we have as a tool is trying to get people to fall in love with the stuff that we are already passionate about. Okay, so from my perspective, which I hoped I kind of made clear, I was a biologist and I wanted people to see how cool biology was and that you don't have to just be in a lab to love nature and do science. But I found that it was really difficult to find resources to learn it myself. For instance, if you go into a bookstore, and people haven't gone into bookstores in a while now, but you go into a bookstore, there are a lot of self-help books that will teach you things like how to make somebody fall in love with you, which, by the way, if you're taking notes, this is a really good one. It looks deceivious though, how to make anybody fall in love with you. It's 100 facts or 100 tips on how to make anybody fall in love with you, all based in science. So really good stuff. But it really should probably be how not to screw it up if you're trying to get someone that you like to fall in love with you as an individual. I'm just going to give you one example because relates to my video filmmaking too. Then this is a fun tip for you to walk away with. I want you to walk away with something. If you're going on a first date, choose something scary, because according to science, if you do something scary, like walk over a scary bridge or well, that's what the scientific study was when they had people walk over scary bridges versus a nice stroll in the forest. the scary bridge somehow triggered some sort of behavioral like connection that they felt more connected to that person afterwards. So I started thinking, how can we best make science films? How can we best make media that make people fall in love with the things we're involved in? So this was the beginning, but it was just because I read books like this and I was like, why isn't there anything for teaching science? So there are two other books that you should write down. Well, this one, if you're into science films, oh, I wrote this one too, so you'll be supporting me. But another good one is, it's a joke, you don't have to buy mine. Another good one is all of Randy Olson's books, Don't Be Such a Scientist. He also has ones that are, I think he has called Houston, We Have a Narrative, and then he has another one called the Abt Method, which I'm going to talk about in a second. So these are good. These are some of the very few resources that if you're into science communication, it's laid out so clearly why it's so important. Okay, now all of this, I'm going to share my screen again. Yes. Okay. It just takes 2 seconds once I get it going. Oh, nope, not that one. Here we go. Okay. This one. So I learned this early on because this is what my dad used to do when I was a kid. This is me at 6. I'm 6 years old.
How do you do, Mr. Klingelhofer?
Fine. Will you take a seat?
Oh, well, thank you. The basic is the least amount that you'll get. The deck support is the most. It's kind of like a hot fudge sundae. You ever had one of those?
Yeah.
So what my dad did right there is he was a salesman for Digital Incorporated, kind of like the Apple of the 80s. And he was trying to get his sales force excited about going out and selling deck support. And he showed them videos. It was crappy. It was definitely a crappy video. But I saw how my dad was using video at the time, and it was really inspiring to me. I think I didn't realize it at the time, but I was using video in everything I did as a powerful communication tool. And so a big part of my mission now is just making sure people have the tools going forward to communicate effectively. Okay, so I went out of order, but now this was another realization for me. I wrote my thesis, so I studied fish and I wanted people to fall in love with fish, but my thesis was this. It's so boring, but it was a behavioral study of the Hawaiian shrimp goby relationship and the effects of predation on the system. That took me several years to write and is like 150 pages long. It's sitting in the library at the University of Hawaii. I went back when I got married for my honeymoon 6 years later to see how many people had checked it out. Five people had read what I did for 2 years. And actually, well, one of them was me and 2 of them were my mom. So 2 people read it, read my work. So I thought that is terrible. So what I did is I created a website. This was back in 2004, called the Shrimp Goby Chronicles. And I started posting all of the chapters of my thesis on here, posting short video clips. And I was getting about 1,000 views a month on the Shrimp Goby Chronicles. And to me, a light switched on in my head. And this was before I even got another degree in science filmmaking. I was like, this is the way. This is how you can get people to see the information that you're doing. And so I would, actually, probably should mute this, but you can see that I was creating different little short clips showing, and I'm not going to show the whole thing, but I was showing, I did animations. I showed the hammerhead sharks that would eat the shrimp gobies and how the shrimp gobies work together. And it was really fun. But I just realized that a 30-second video clip got people more excited than anything else I could be doing as far as trying to communicate how things worked. I mean, minus the fact that like the data is important, and I'm not going to diminish that, but like so much of me wanted to make some change. Okay. Then I always had in my head TV. That's the end goal. I'm doing all this other stuff, but TV. And it's because I grew up, in the 80s and 90s mostly, and that was the only platform. So I've come to realize that in documentaries, there is this gradient where you have documentaries that are super factual on one end, and then you have what I like to say is you just made stuff up on the other. You know, it's not, and it is a gradient. It's not yes or no. It's not binary. It's not one or the other. There's so much gray area in between. Now I'm going to show you a few like 10 to 20 second clips from some TV shows that are science documentaries that are on TV. And I want you guys to figure out where they fall along the line. And if you have a notebook in front of you, feel free to put your own marks. I'm going to show you where I think they lay on the line, though. Now, here, and part of the reason for this, and I will preface this, I went to a big science conference, science filmmaking conference in Boston in 2015. And there was all of the major networks that were there. And somebody in the audience asked all of these heads of the networks, do you feel like you have a responsibility to tell the truth or to tell people what they need to hear? And these were probably in light of global climate change, habitat loss, biodiversity loss, endangered species, something to the effect of that. And everybody agreed, except the head of Discovery Channel, who, or it was actually the representative from Discovery Channel, she stood up and said, no, we want to show what people want to watch. Now that statement there is really important for you to understand where TV is, because a lot of networks think that. They don't, their ethics are whatever people watch is what we show. So here is what they showed right after they said that.
Aliens and the military. The list of global threats to the human race is long. But could Earth's armed forces be facing a new enemy that is literally out of this world?
We have only to open our eyes to see how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet, I ask you, is not an alien force already among us?
So I swear, we all watched that clip and we were all looking around to ourselves and we were like, did they just show that? That is the most ridiculous thing I have ever seen. And what's weird about that clip is it didn't say there were aliens. So technically, they didn't lie, but they implied very clearly there could be aliens. So that's just something to think about. And so I put a new kind of little dot on this gradient, and that's not telling the whole truth. I think it does a huge disservice in that it builds conspiracy theories. But who is at fault there? Is it the public? Because they watched that show and loved it, and the ratings went high? Or is it the executives because, I don't know, they have a social responsibility or something? But you think about that. Okay, here's the next one. It's called Mermaids, Body Found.
Oh my God! What is that?
Did you get that shot? Oh my God!
In 2004, two boys were the first to arrive on a mass whale beaching in Washington State. They captured it on a cell phone. The boys claim they saw something that day. They claim they saw a body.
So I don't know about you, but I would say, okay, so clearly, I'm going to preface where I put this on the map. They clearly made all of that up, but the way I saw it, nobody in their right mind would think that mermaids actually exist. So it was really more of a spoof documentary. Like it was a mock, like we'd call it in the industry, a mockumentary. They were making fun of, they were using the documentary format, but just kind of having fun with it. So I kind of saw it as a little bit humorous. But I had a friend at NOAA, which is, you know, our ocean administration here, that said they were constantly getting calls after that show went out because people thought the government was hiding mermaids from them. And I was like, what? How would they believe that? Well, obviously from that show. And they didn't make it very clear that it was, you know, they might have had a little fine print at the end or at the beginning. So it makes you think, like, what is that good? Is that not good? Does it need to be more clear? I don't know. Okay, so the next one I've got two more because this is just going to make you think, wow, we really got to do something after I show you these. The next one is a documentary called Voodoo Sharks, which was a documentary about a large shark in the Louisiana area down in the Gulf of Mexico that there were legends about. So they made this little clip.
Jonathan Davis and his team of scientists arrive at their first destination, the brackish waters of the Gulf of Mexico, just outside of Lake Bourne. They believe that if there is a monster shark entering Lake Pontchartrain, it would likely be sticking to this area, where the salty waters of the Gulf meet the fresh waters just outside of New Orleans.
Sharks are pretty amazing creatures. All of them have been found in weird places, so I'm not 100% certain that it would happen, but it could happen.
Okay, so this is where it gets weird. He had no idea they were making that show. So this was a statement, and I'll just read it for you. He said, I asked a few of the crew members, including the producer, what the show was going to be about. I never got a straight answer, and the producer seemed to avoid the question. I was just told it would be combined with some other filming to make one show about Louisiana shark research. So in that case, they went out with a shark researcher and filmed him doing his thing, asked him some random questions about sharks, and then pieced it together into something. So they twisted his words out of context. So for me, if you were to draw a line where you'd have to say it's over the line, Voodoo Sharks would be right there. Now, that also went with another show called Megalodon. Oh, I don't have that clip. Where they were talking about how Megalodon could still exist. Maybe some of you saw that one. And it was this weird realization to me that we have to do something, and we have to teach people to be better at interpreting these docs and maybe teaching some ethics to people who are in charge. I don't know. But at the very same time, I was doing this show. So this is my real life example. I did a show called Life After Chernobyl. So I was the host of that show. I'm over on the left-hand side here with my co-host, Marianne Ojeda. And what we did is we were the first big film crew given full access to the exclusion zone. You can't tell, but I'm out there in the cooling pond of Chernobyl, or of reactor number 4. Reactor number 4 is just over the hill, but I think this is number 2. And what I was studying, what I was brought in to communicate more accurately, even though in the documentary they said I was studying it, was the wolves in Chernobyl, because there were legends and rumors that the wolves there were radioactive, and clearly they are radioactive. I mean, everything there is radioactive to some degree. We're all radioactive, right? So it's weird, like, are you lying or are you not? But there was a few incidents of wolves that were attacking the guards that were at the station. We knew, however, going in, that it was rabies. And that was supposed to be the reveal at the end. And we were going to set the hook. And this is how storytelling works. You set a good hook. Like, are these wolves radioactive? Do we need to be worried about them? So I was like, I don't know, I'm fine with that. We'll start with that and we'll end with it. And I spent the whole time talking to the wolf biologist and telling her, don't worry, we won't vilify the wolves. But then I watched the documentary after it's released. Nobody says anything about the wolves being having rabies. And then I see all of this stuff come out. Like, this is a video game that you can buy called Fear the Wolves, where you run around Chernobyl and there's these radioactive wolves that come and kill you. And so you have to shoot them. And I was like, we could have easily dispensed of the myth that these wolves are aggressive because of the radiation, which was not true at all. In fact, they're doing much better in Chernobyl simply because there are no humans there. And it just left a little bit of a sour taste in my mouth. So my feel is that somehow scientists need to take back the role of being the science communicators, because right now, the way it is, you've got TV, which is a bunch of executives in New York, in Bristol, in England, probably, there's some in Germany, but like, it's mostly those places, or LA. And the LA types, they're the worst. But it's these people who have no science background. And then even if they bring in a host like myself, I don't really have a whole lot of say in the end in the end product unless I'm producing it. But that's where things like YouTube come in, and I think it's going to change everything dramatically. So let me address real quick how it is that we might create any change through film, because I've spent a lot of time thinking about this. Like, you make all these films, I've tried to get people to go outside, but is anything actually happening? So I have a couple of fun case studies that are related to that. So my real goal is biodiversity loss. I studied biodiversity, particularly in fish, and I was just really disappointed that the world's fish were getting overfished and that nobody was doing anything about it. This is just a little drawing. It doesn't really have anything to do with what I'm talking about, other than to show that I create a lot of media about fish. So in this case, I was concerned with, if we're going to get policy change, how do we affect this person? And are there any good examples where this person made a change? So this goes back to when I was studying in Hawaii. I studied right here on Oahu. If you're not familiar with the Hawaiian Islands, this is where everybody visits. This is the Hawaiian island chain that everybody knows is where all the volcanoes come from, all the way up to Kauai. So it's actually a small piece of the larger Northwest Hawaiian island chain, which goes 1,600 miles all the way up here to Curie Atoll. Now, Midway has a big airport on it, so that was important for World War II. So just for reference, so it's this whole chain. Now, as a biologist, we all wanted to protect those Northwest Hawaiian Islands because they were fragile and could easily be overfished or destroyed. And fishermen always wanted to fish it. But yet there were very few fishermen that were actually wanting to fish it, because you have to have big vessels. And so it was this interesting battle. And then Jean-Michel Cousteau created a documentary called The Journey to Curie, I think is what he called it. It was part of this DVD series. He gave a private screening to the then president, George Bush. And one of the things, like, if you've ever watched the documentaries about those islands, they're full of trash. And the seabirds, the albatross there, are eating all the trash and they're dying. It's pretty dramatic if you see the film. So it was apparently, and I talked to some of the people that were there, they said it was so, it made such a mark on the president that only a few weeks after that, he signed with one stroke of the pen to make the largest national marine monument the U.S. has. And it's called, if you want to try to pronounce that in your head, Papa Hanau Mokuakea. I thought I was going to get it right the first time. Anyway, Hawaiian name. It's very difficult to say. But they protected that whole thing. So that was like huge win. And it was in large part due to the work of some advocates and a film. And the film was apparently one of the driving forces that convinced the president to do that. And so I use this always as just a way that, like, if you can get film in front of somebody, it's extremely powerful. And we probably all know that to some degree. And I'm going to kind of just show you one other example, how it doesn't have to make huge policy change, but you can do your part in getting people's science research out there. Now, I also, somebody said, how do you visually tell some of these stories and how do you use YouTube? Remember these stories here, because I'm going to get to it at the end, but it's all related to this bug story. Okay, so as preface, this is my friend, Michelle Trotwine. She was studying for her work as a postdoc, the bugs in people's homes. And so we decided we were going to make a series of videos about bugs in homes across the world. So we did some on the East Coast of the US, some in San Francisco. We went to Australia, we went to Peru, we went to Sweden. And then we ran out of money. Also, we were going to hit all those countries. But and so we told a whole bunch of stories in this film. In these films, I'm going to show just a little clip of one of them because it relates to how I tell these stories, and then but I'm only going to show just a little piece of it. So here's the first little clip.
So if you've watched the rest of this series, you probably already realized that you're not alone in your house. But what if you're like, hey, I have an immaculately clean house. I clean, I disinfect, I scrub, and I don't see any bugs. Well, if that's you, I'm here to tell you that you have an invisible diversity of arthropods and microbes living with you every day. But don't fret, these are good things to have in your house.
The bugs of your home.
Now, I'm part of a global study to research bugs in homes.
Our houses, our bodies are actually relatively unexplored ecosystems. We just want to get this global perspective of the types of species that live in houses.
I followed Michelle and Misha to San Francisco, the Peruvian Amazon, and now we're here in Sweden.
So today, Jonas is going to be our tour guide.
Tour guide. This is Turkish pepper.
Enjoyment. Okay. Whoa!
They are terrible candies.
While we're here to study arthropods, well, the study wouldn't be complete without learning first about Sweden. And who better to show it than my partner in crime, Jonas, who was born and raised right here.
The islands and the shoreline here is very rocky. You have these little islands that people live on all year round. The O with 2 dots is like yeah, those are hard words to start with. Means island. It's just that letter.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, with 2 dots over it, that means island.
It's the last letter of the alphabet, but it also means island.
It looks like a little island.
Björka.
Important words to know since our first homes are right here on the island of birch trees, Björka. And like the other countries, we're picking 6 homes, all with different styles, but all uniquely Swedish.
I think it'll be really fun to introduce some of these people whose houses we're going to the invisible diversity that's all around them. And I'm kind of curious what they're going to say.
People here in Sweden do seem pretty aware of the bugs they see in their homes.
They live there and they have the place there and they are very cute. I think they are cute.
But besides the critters that we actually see crawling around or dead on windowsills, here are 3 things that you may never know you're living with.
First,
okay. So I'm just going to stop it there. And I will get to some of why that's important. But what happened is if you look at all of those videos combined, there were a few major facts that came out of every single one of them. And we saw ourselves as the initial translators of her research. And then what happened, and this was amazing, our video didn't go viral or anything, but every single one of these networks picked it up, right? And it was amazing. So everybody's calling up Michelle saying, we love your story. We want to do more. So she continued to do all of these stories with all of these networks. And then Ellen picked it up, and this is just funny, so I'm going to share it.
Right now, I have good news and I have bad news. The bad news is the scientists, now, you know, the scientists find things sometimes. They found that your house is filled with bugs. The good news is, you know, I don't really have any good news about that. The study says that it was done by scientists who they collect bugs for a living. They're called entomologists, which is a fancy word for disgusting. These scientists did a study where they went into people's houses and they had to count how many different types of bugs there were. How many do you think they found in a house? Just take a guess, like 5, 10, 20, 30, 40, 15, 17, 60, 100 is right. That is the right answer. I was going to keep going until we got it right. That's what I was determined. 100, and not in a hoarder's house. That's a regular house. They would have found more, but the people who lived there came home early. Obviously, you know, spiders and flies and ants were found, but unfortunately they found a lot more, and I'm not going to gross you out by talking about all these bugs that are living in your house. I'm going to show you some photos. For instance, they found that 98% of the homes contain book lice. Yeah, they're lice and they live in books. So, and if you're ever itchy while you're reading in bed, this is great news, because it's not bed bugs, it's book lice. So,
I just, the take home for me is we made a video that actually got spread around to all of the different, I mean, who knows how Ellen saw it. She might have seen some of these other groups, but like nobody was doing a video about bugs in your homes. And all of those facts that she took were directly from Michelle's mouth, and probably the exact sound clip if I look at each each bit from our videos. So I was really happy about that. And I think that's just also a good example of how you can directly translate scientific research and maybe get it out into the general public a little bit better. Okay, so I am happy. So this is what I'm going to do. Now I'm going to quickly hit on some tips and tricks for producing your own content. And this is stuff that we can also hit if people have questions moving on into the thing. But I'm just going to skim through some of this before the end of the hour presentation here. So the very first thing that you need to do if you're making content, I think, is think backwards. Who is going to see it at the end? So once you know how they're going to consume it and who that person is, then you can start re-engineering it the other direction. So oftentimes when I work with a scientist, I say, who do you want this to be? And they say, we want it to be available for everyone. And I'm like, okay, well, let's be a little more specific. And they're like, well, how about, everybody always says everyone. Oftentimes we do end up just saying, we want this to be a policy change. Let's think of the staffer, but then not say it's for staffers. Let's say it's like kind of for everyone, but like you're very directly targeting that individual. For some of the stuff that I do in my science books, we know it's kids in 5th grade. You know, so you have to have a picture of who that person's going to be. And then, oh, I didn't realize I have a moving graphic. Cool. The platform that people watch it on is also really important. And just to make this point, if you go into a movie theater and it starts out slow, you're not going to leave. You're going to stick around at least until halfway. I've only walked out of one movie, but you basically are glued to that seat. So you have a different ability to tell the story in a movie theater than you do on these other platforms. So on TV, people have a remote and they're clicking through. And oftentimes they'll get to your program halfway through. And you also have commercial breaks to mix in. So different platform, right? Nowadays with smartphones, you have, and even with YouTube, I've decided about 10 seconds to get them hooked. I always ask them, what is the one message that you want to get across? Because it should be one and we can pepper everything in. So we start with it, we make all of the examples support it, and then we finish with that example. And then that's how it is. For instance, one of the things that we did is I worked with the US Forest Service and they wanted fire to be explained because they said the biggest issue they have is that people don't want fire, they don't want smoke, and they won't let people come in and burn in the off season doing prescribed burning. And so for them, and because the biggest problem is they have too much wood on the ground, so to get the forests so that they're in shape for fire season, they have to do firework. So we went in and we made a video with the main message is was we need more fire. and that the forest has too much fire on the ground. This is where I alluded to at the beginning. I'm worried that President Trump saw that film and was like, it's the problem of California that we have too much fire on the ground. That's the problem. It's not climate change. And I was like, crap, because it's not that it's not climate change part of it. It's like all of those things. So, you know, that I suppose I could have, who knows if you watched my film or not, but that's what we were making it for. It was for politicians, and it still became a political issue. So who knows? Okay. So here's a couple of tricks. Right now, if you study communication, you might run across the Abt Storytelling Method. Now, if you're new to this, I'm just going to give you the quick synopsis on it because it's really simple. This is not how I learned it, but it's how people are talking about it. It's ABT stands for and, but, and therefore. And if you learn this, you'll start seeing it in all of the work you do. So if I'm just giving you facts, so I'm saying sharks are this long and sharks are this old and sharks do this and sharks do that. That's just and, right? You haven't actually made anybody interested in your film by saying, but sharks are being killed by the thousands, therefore we need to do this action or whatever. So let me show you what I did with the bug one. So you can see a rough ABT method here. So I'm talking at the beginning and I'm saying, well, you might have seen some of the videos that we did, and you might think you have a clean house, and you might know that there are some bugs, but did you know there are a lot of bugs that you've never seen and will never see? Therefore, continue watching the rest of the film to find out how they're okay. Something to the effect of that. That's kind of the ABT method. Now, I often just see this as like, you can establish a hook and then you can get people to want to find out the resolution of the hook. So that's how I see it. So I don't always say it's the ABT method, but it's useful to think about. Okay, so if you were, say, just because this was a question, I was like, if we can address this, how do you present research visually? One key is a lot of B-roll. So I was going to talk over this as I let it play, but I'm just going to hope you remember this. Think back in your head to the clip that I showed with the bugs. I am talking, and at the same time, everything I say has B-roll that accompanies it. So I said something to the effect of, you have a clean house. So I show a clean house. And you might dust. So I show somebody dusting. And you might know of like bugs on windowsills. So I show bugs on windowsills. You see? So part of it is that if somebody's watching, they need to be constantly engaged. Right? That's kind of the ADD part of people. Like if it's boring visually, they may tune out. So B-roll helps with that. Okay. The other aspect is I think it's really important in my filmmaking, to keep it real and show the personality of people on camera. Again, this is my method of filmmaking, but I'm just showing you screenshots from what we just saw. I like to show that Jonas is our tour guide. And Jonas has a little bit of a quirky personality and likes to feed people Swedish chocolates. And Misha is a scientist, but she's fun and she has a personality. You see, it's a lot of, well, what I will say traditional filmmaking, they would show Misha as they would frame her up really nicely. And she'd be the voice of authority. It'd be they call it like a 3-button shot or a 2-button shot. So they'd be like framed from here to here. And she'd be looking off camera and she would say whatever lines she needed to say. And they would make her look like super powerful and all knowing. But at least in film school, we were kind of taught this is like a feminist way of filmmaking, showing the reality, the more behind the scenes, like the actual life of a scientist, not just propping them up on a pedestal. I don't really know if they would call it that nowadays, but that's what we did. And then the other method I use is you mix in facts into entertainment. So there's no reason in a bugs show we needed to talk about what the sound was, and that it was an island thing, but it's kind of fun. And it's like, oh, you're learning a little bit about Sweden. So, I like to see it as like this curve. It goes up and down, and it's like, you mix in heavy facts, and then it's like, oh, you gotta go down and, or it's like high pace, low pace, high pace, low pace, or facts, entertainment. So you're constantly going back and forth, and you just got to get a feel for how long each of those is. And you'll see when you watch other films, and you'll notice, wow, this is way too facts heavy, or this is not fun enough. Or sometimes the opposite. It's like, this is just fun. Where's the information? I'm not learning anything. Okay, so YouTube tricks, because this was also a question I got. This is what I do. And I'm going to keep this brief because not everybody's into YouTube, but it is really important these days. The first is the hook. The hook is often, surprisingly, not the video. The hook is two things. The thumbnail. This video, by the way, I show because I'm not going to show it. This is gross. It has the most views I've ever had on a video. It's only a year old. It has like 10 million views. But I did just a decomposition video with this. So the title seems pretty cool, and the thumbnail looks pretty cool, and it has a click-through rate of between 12 and 18%. Which is unheard of. Most of the average click-through rates are 2.5%. So if it's on the sidebar, 2.5% of the time people will click it. That's an average YouTube video. My bad ones are between 1 and 0.5%. This one is sometimes up to 18% of the time people see it, they click on it. So it's unheard of. This is another one that has a really high click-through rate, and it'll lead to my next point, but I don't know why. This is literally a video about 6 knots. I don't know, but it has 208,000 views, and it's only a year old too. So not 10 million, but more than like 100. I would have expected more like 100. It's just a not video. So I think what happened, March 2019. Okay, so here, so those are thumbnail and description. Now here's a short intro to the to one video that you can very clearly see the hook, and just pay attention to this hook and see what you think if you would continue watching it. March 2019. I got a hold of a full cage of hungry adult yellow fever mosquitoes to see what would happen if I let them suck my blood.
This is before shot.
Oh, should I take off my ring?
Well, I mean, if it's fingers well.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my
God.
This wasn't a rigorous science experiment, but it was something I had always wondered how my body would handle.
Then I've always wanted to do this, and
so my goal was to stick in my left hand until all the mosquitoes fed.
So I'm just helping Rob here. I'm just opening up the entryway for his hand to go into the cage.
I also wanted to see what would happen to Jonas. But because one of us had to hold the steering wheel to drive home, we decided he'd take another cage and do it on his back. And I will tell you now, I would never have predicted before how my body actually reacted.
See, there you go. That video has 2 million views, surprisingly, because it has a high watch through rate. That's the retention. People continue until that mosquito feeds on me at 7 minutes. It's amazing. Okay, 2 last points, and then I think we're about ready for questions. One important thing I do is I establish credibility in all the YouTube videos, because you instantly are watching and you're like, does this person have anything to say? It's not always me. Sometimes I establish the credibility of the facility that I'm in, and by association, that's credibility. This is a sea turtle rehab facility. And then I keep it visually fun. And then the last thing is you encourage people to engage and interact. It's just the YouTube trick. And that's what we're talking about. So this isn't just because these are my 2 boys. We have August is on the right, and he's a little older. He's 9. 6 is my son, Leo. And if somebody says on a YouTube video, please like and subscribe to this channel, they literally will stop the video, like and subscribe. And if they say comment, they comment. And they are 6 and 9. And so sometimes that's who you're talking to, but that's how you beat the YouTube algorithm. So just pointing that out. Okay. So what do you think, Tobias? Should we open it up for questions? I have other things, but that's mostly the gist of the presentation. And then I have other things that if we want to get to, we can.
Yes.
Okay.
That's great.
Okay. Well, I will admit I only have a little bit more presentation. Then you're going to have to ask some questions, and then we can go from there. The fun part is the presentation, or is the questions. Okay. So I'm going to share my screen again. Okay. This is something that I think is really useful for people who are going to be telling stories to think about, because you have to work on it. This is this phenomenon called the curse of knowledge. And it goes something like this: the better you know something, the less well you're able to communicate it. Now, I think we all know somebody who, I don't know, in my head, I have somebody who knows insects really well. Like some of these people we worked with, they could tell you everything about insects, how many hairs they have, but they have almost no ability to communicate effectively what is so cool about insects. But it seems so ironic because they know it better than anybody else in the world. And so I find sometimes when I go into these films, even though I don't know much about it, I know how to communicate it. And I don't think that this phenomenon called the curse of knowledge needs to pertain to everybody, because you can have people like, let's say, Neil deGrasse Tyson. He knows astrophysics, but he's pretty good at communicating things. And I think part of it is because he learned to communicate along the way. So if you're a scientist, understand that communication is a skill as well, and that you need to learn it as you go. Okay, one other thing to point out, I guess I should make this big, is this idea of is video really necessary if you want to make a difference? Okay. Now, so I like to think of it, say I'm this little bug or this little plant. Does that little bug or that little plant need you filming it to be able to survive and live in this world? Or like, is it really that important that you take the film of that particular individual and then show the world about it? And I don't think it necessarily does, but if nobody knows about it, then it very easily could get overlooked and nobody cares about it and it could get plowed over, right? So your video camera then is kind of a tool to allow you to interact with, or is to show people what you care about and say, let's think about these bugs, these plants, and make sure that they don't, disappear. Okay, what else do I got here? Okay, that's well, I'll end it with this, because sometimes I do end it, especially when I give science presentations to scientists. If nothing else, when you think about what a scientist is and what a scientist does, I hope that in the future, not only is it like what people look like, but beyond that, this is supposed to be me with the blue hair because that's what I had when I drew this image. Beyond that is maybe scientists will have media, maybe they'll have a camera, maybe they'll be taking film or working with that person to try to tell the stories. Because I think so much of this is, it's dependent on two people. It's the people who make media and the people who are in charge of science and the funding of science. They've got to work more together because we can't have TV making all of the decisions and showing the public what everything's about. We have to have more of a collaborative working space between science and media. And that's what I find was so neat about what you guys are doing is, and I don't know the full background, but just the idea of wanting to communicate science better, become better at communicating in general. So I'm hoping that I can distill a little bit of like what it's like from the science side to you all. And maybe some of you will take that up and start doing it. Okay, that's what I have.